What actually constitutes a fun spec to play or a fun class to play? It seems very subjective. What I consider to be fun and what you consider to be fun are most likely two very different things. So with that in mind, what I personally consider to make a class or a spec fun really comes down to three things. So firstly, it has to be a dynamic spec, so something that's got procs to watch out for, buffs and debuffs to be managed, and it simply doesn't boil down to having a few buttons to be pressed over and over again in a specific order. I do want to make it clear though, dynamic doesn't mean difficult. As an example of a spec that hasn't made my top 3 would be an assassination rogue. An assassination rogue is anything but difficult, however it has buffs and debuffs to manage, even if that management is pretty simple. It also has blindside, which is a proc that you need to react to, which allows you to use an ability called dispatch, and it has a decent amount of utility and cooldowns for different situations, so dynamic doesn't always have to mean difficult. Secondly, the output of course is very important. There's no point having a spec that's fun to play that no one wants to take because it just doesn't have the damage. By no means does the spec need to be topping the meters on every boss, but thankfully in Mr. Pandaria, especially more now than ever, with Blizzard's intervention on class tuning, we should never really have an issue of a class or a spec not being desirable because it looks like Blizzard are trying to make every class and spec viable or desirable anyway. The last point might seem like a bit of a strange one, but for me it's also very important to not be a one spec pony. It's important for me that I at least enjoy one of the other specs, preferably all three would be a bonus, that the class actually brings. So using Death Knight as an example, a Frost Death Knight is an incredibly fun spec to play, but I don't enjoy Unholy and I don't enjoy Blood, which means for the entirety of playing a DK I would be stuck with that one spec. That's why even though this is a top 3 fun spec video to play, really it's top 3 classes because it needs to be far more than just 3 specs. So with all that said, what are my top 3 fun specs or 3 classes in Mist of Pandaria that you should consider playing as your main? First up has to be the Retribution Paladin, with what in my opinion is now one of the strongest melee DPS specs in the game. It isn't a hard spec to play and it has mind-blowingly good burst when all your cooldowns are up. Not only this, but it has a ridiculously fun rotation, or what I would consider a priority list. Whenever I'm playing a Rep Paladin or any Paladin spec in general, I can tell you what I do have are a very particular set of skills. With specific talents you can bring double hand of sacrifices, double hand of protections, a 20% magic damage reduction for the raid, even things like Hand of Salvation and Hand of Freedom shouldn't be overlooked. Ticking off the list of criteria from the beginning, you've got a buff that you need to manage at all times during the fight, being Inquisition. Now this has actually been made easier to manage compared to how it was in Cataclysm, because now with each charge of Holy Power up to 3 Holy Power gives you 20 seconds of this buff. So in total, using it with 3 Holy Power, it's going to be up for a full minute. And you've even got glyphs that extend the duration of it if you get killing blows while you've got Inquisition up. So quite honestly, most of the time in the open world, you only need to put this up once and you can forget about it as long as you're killing things frequently enough. And even on bosses in raids, if there's adds that you can kill regularly enough, again, it's just something that you've got to keep an eye on to make sure that it's there, but it's not the hardest thing in the world to manage. Having so many more ways to generate Holy Power now compared to Cataclysm also makes it feel so much better, because now you've got 5 Holy Powers instead of 3, but all of your abilities are just split between builders and spenders. So with things like Crusader Strike, Exorcism, Judgment, Hammer of Wrath and Hammer of the Righteous all generating Holy Power, and then having that to spend on Divine Storm for AoE, Templar's Verdict for single target, Inquisition as your maintenance buff, and then even Word of Glory as a heal. The spec feels so much more fast-paced compared to Cataclysm, and you're just burning through your Holy Power so quick that it just feels fun. You're getting from 0 to 3 Holy Power in quite a short space of time, ready to do that big Templar's Verdict that recently was buffed by 20% as well. So in the lead up to this video, all of your builders had a 10% damage increase, and your big spender being Templar's Verdict had a 20% damage increase. Now the Rep Paladin's not all about single target. With the addition of Hammer of the Righteous, which is an AoE builder, and then Divine Storm becoming an AoE spender, you can put out some incredible numbers when you're doing both of these in conjunction with Seal of the Righteousness. I did say we also want procs to look out for in combat as well, because that just adds that dynamic feel into the spec. spec, and the Ret Paladin has no shortage of these with things like Art of War, where your auto attacks have a 20% chance of resetting the cooldown on Exorcism. There's an amazing glyph around Exorcism as well called Glyph of Mass Exorcism, which reduces the range of Exorcism to melee range, but now 25% of the damage you deal to the primary target also now does damage to all enemies within 8 yards. So even on a fight where you're not actively bothered about the adds that are around, you're really focusing on the boss, you're just naturally doing cleave anyway, just doing your single target rotation. You can even get more procs to look out for by taking the level 75 talent being Divine Purpose, where when you spend Holy Power, you've got a 25% chance to cause the Divine Purpose effect. This means your next Holy Power ability will consume no Holy Power, and it will cast as if 3 Holy Power were consumed. Now this is nothing new, and if you play Ret Paladin in Cataclysm, you'll be used to Divine Purpose, but now you do have a decision to make. Because Holy Avenger on the same talent line is very similar to Zealotry, and Sanctified Wrath is actually what enables you to have some incredible burst when your cooldowns are up, because you can be throwing Hammers of Wrath out so much quicker that do an absolute truckload of damage, and Avenging Wrath lasts 50% longer as well. Overall, Ret Paladin is not difficult and feels fantastic. Honestly, for me personally, I would say one of my most fun specs to play. There's one criteria we didn't tick off though, and that's the other specs. So even if you're a die-hard Ret Paladin, the day will come where you're asked to heal or you're asked to tank. And you're in luck because again, both of these specs are incredible as well. Holy Paladin recently got some amazing buffs on the beta where it's now putting out incredible HPS. They also changed it so your Devotion Aura, which is your 20% magical damage reduction for Retribution, now does all forms of damage when you're in Holy spec. And once again, Holy Paladin is not the most difficult spec to play. You're building your Holy Power so quick to be able to get big Eternal Flames out on everybody in the raid, because quite honestly, that is the most optimal playstyle. It's get to 3 Holy Power, Eternal Flame someone, get to 3 Holy Power, Eternal Flame someone else, because this puts a 30-second heal over time on, which is also activating your Divine Illumination, which is your Absorb. And then Protection Paladin as well. While it's not the highest DPS tank in Phase 1, it has got such an extraordinary toolkit that it feels great to play one anyway. This will be one that scales tremendously through the expansion as it gets access to more haste, purely because of the talent Sanctity of Battle. Now, Sanctity of Battle affects all 3 specs, where your haste levels affect the cooldown of your main abilities. But not only does it reduce the cooldown, it reduces the global cooldown as well. And the more haste you've got, the more Holy Power you can generate in the same space of time. And when you think about that around protection, you can literally off-heal a raid while main tanking a boss. It's that strong. So yeah, the Paladin overall is absolutely amazing in my opinion, with Retribution being my favourite spec, but it being an absolute bonus that both of the other specs are not only viable, but definitely desirable. I don't think it will come as any surprise that Windwalker Monk is number 2 for me. For anyone who's watched my videos or watched me stream for any length of time, you know I'm an absolute freak when it comes to the Monk. It pretty much will be the only class that I play throughout the entirety of Mr. Pandaria, because all I'll have is multiple monks. The Windwalker specifically really does tick all the boxes though. You've got management buffs and debuffs by maintaining Tiger Power on yourself and Rising Sun Kick on the target. You've got a rotation that feels really fun with actually having to manage 2 resources, because you never want to overcap chi or energy. So it's finding that nice balance between generating chi and using that chi to give you time for your energy to regen. You've got lots of procs that you're looking out for, but the most basic ones that you're looking for would be where you get your free blackout kicks and free tiger palms. This comes from a passive ability called Combo Breaker, which interestingly, just for a tidbit of knowledge here, was the mastery that the monk originally launched with in 5.0. The thing is, you should be looking for far more procs than just Combo Breaker, because you have a cooldown that you can use called Tiger's Eye Brew. Now, depending on your levels of mastery, depends on how potent this is of a buff. But basically, for every 3 chi that you spend, you're going to get 1 stack of Tiger's Eye Brew. You can use this whenever you want. You don't necessarily have to use it with 10, but 10 is the cap. Now, with absolutely 0 mastery and just taking into account the ability itself and your 1.6% base mastery, each stack is going to increase your damage by 5.1%. So assuming 0 mastery and using 10 stacks, this is going to be 51% damage, and this lasts 15 seconds. Now on the basis most trinket procs range from 15 to 25 seconds, it's going to be incredibly important to line these things up. Because when your Relic of Zuen pops, for example, tracking that and understanding when you've got maximum procs up to then use Tiger's Eye Brew is just going to make that extra damage even more valuable. Another amazing ability is Storm, Earth and Fire, which is so unique that you will absolutely love it. There's certain fights where you feel incredibly overpowered just having this ability, but you can basically split yourself up to 3 times, so that would be 2 plus yourself. If you split yourself once, you and your spirit are going to be doing 70% damage, so this is actually a 40% damage buff once you've got this up. If you split yourself twice, however, so there's 2 spirits hitting and you're hitting, each of you are now going to do 55% damage, which is a 65% damage increase. Now, the reason this is so strong is because for normal classes to cleave, things need to be on top of each other. However, it doesn't matter for you. You're going to be doing that 65% increased damage no matter where everything stood. The cherry on the top, though, is if everything is stacked, so when you're cleaving with things like either Spinning Crane Kick or Rushing Jade Wind, you and your spirits are all hitting everything that you're attacking. So yes, you're going to get a bigger benefit like everyone else would that's got good cleave if they're stacked, but you don't actually require them to be stacked. Now, you also have an absolutely amazing toolkit with things like Zen Meditation, Touch of Karma, the ability to teleport from one place to another with Transcendence, even the ability if the boss is out of range to do some form of DPS and keep cycling through that chi by building chi with Crackling Jade Lightning and then spending chi with Spinning Fire Blossom, and even Touch of Death, where you can just finish the fight with an absolutely monstrous amount of damage because basically you're going to do as much damage to the boss as health is that you've got. Talent choices are also incredibly important on a fight-by-fight basis because you've got things that are really strong against magical damage, things that are really good against both physical and magic damage, and then even just passives that you can just forget about and you're going to do some passive healing throughout the fight. The same goes for your self-heals with Chi Wave, Zen Sphere, or Chi Burst, or even your level 90 talent for AoE being Rushing Jade Wind, single target being Zuen, and even Chi Torpedo situationally being quite useful, although quite honestly less useful for Windwalker and Brewmaster. But overall, the Windwalker is absolutely fantastic. It's really fun to play, feels dynamic, feels fast-paced, and then the best thing is, so are Mistweaver and Brewmaster. I'm not going to sit and go too deep into Brewmaster and Mistweaver, you've just got to take my word for it that both of them are incredibly fun specs to play. The Brewmaster feels less like you're actually tanking and more like you're a DPS that's holding aggro. You have absolutely amazing self-heals and even raid heals by putting a statue down, and when you deal X amount of damage, it's also going to then put an absorb shield on someone in the raid. You have little healing orbs that you can just strafe left and right between, doing as much healing on yourself as the healers are doing on the raid, and you're spinning lots of plates. You're maintaining a shuffle buff that gives you parry and stagger. You've got a brand new mechanic called stagger where you don't take all of the damage instantly, instead you take a portion of it and the rest is divided over 10 seconds. The Brewmaster's just got tons going for it, and I have no doubt that if you enjoy Windwalker, you will enjoy Brewmaster. The same goes for Mistweaver, the most unique and fun to play healer in World of Warcraft in my opinion. You can go up in melee and be absolutely pumping like a DPS, but also keeping the raid or the group alive in a dungeon. You can stand back and just be a generic healer using Soothing Mist and then spreading Renewing Mists around and then doing huge uplifts that's going to heal the raid. The best way to play, of course, is doing a mix of this by both going up and doing melee damage, which is going to equate to healing, but also spreading those Renewing Mists and doing uplifts and making sure you've got a firm understanding of the fight so you know when the damage is going to come in, so you're already prepared for it, ready to just blow loads of AoE healing. The AoE healing finishes and then you go back to just literally doing melee damage and just pumping the boss. Again, if you enjoy the Windwalker and you enjoy the Brewmaster, the Mistweaver will be a healing style that you'll enjoy, even if a healer is not the class for you. Just because in smaller group play, like in dungeons, you haven't even got to worry about it too much. You might throw the odd normal heal around, but honestly, the majority of the time, you'll just be running through doing DPS. On the basis of how much of a monk fanboy I am, you're probably surprised this came in at number 2 instead of number 1. And quite honestly, for me, it would be number 1. The only thing I'd say is the monk is a little bit more difficult to play than the paladin. The paladin's very fun and very easy. The monk's very fun, but a little bit more challenging. That's the only reason paladin's number 1 and monk's number 2. So what does that bring us on to in number 3? Now this is probably one you wasn't expecting, and it doesn't fully meet every criteria set out at the start of the video. The reason for this is Frost Mage is so fun that I don't even want to play either of the other specs. The fortunate thing is neither of the other specs in Phase 1 currently are performing how Frost does anyway, and the other specs will come on later down the line, so you would have the option Arcane and Fire on a bit of a phase-by-phase basis. Frost will remain strong throughout, and again, the other ones will overtake slightly at different points. But seriously, neither of them are as fun as Frost. When we talk about a dynamic spec, if you like things to react to, it doesn't get more satisfying than a Frost Mage. You've got Fingers of Frost procs that will be going off that you're then consuming by using Ice Lance. This increases Ice Lance damage when you're using it, and because of the Fingers of Frost procs, Fingers of Frost causes your Ice Lance to act as if the target is frozen, so it's going to deal that extra damage, and it also increases its damage by 25%. But not only this, your mastery all revolves around this use as well. So when you're damaging enemies with Frostbolt, Frostfire Bolt, you've got a portion of that damage that's being stored as icicles, and when you cast Ice Lance, all of these start firing off towards the target as well. Your mastery also increases your Water Elemental's Water Bolt, but we're talking about fun here, that's pretty boring. You've also still got Brain Freeze, so your bombs that you've got a choice between 3 of now, which we'll get into in a second, makes your next Frostfire Bolt to be instant cast, cost no mana, and act as if your target was frozen. Now the whole point of it acting like they're frozen is thanks to Shatter. So Shatter doubles the critical strike chance of all of your spells against frozen targets by an additional 50%. So when you're getting all these procs and you're firing off Ice Lances, you're firing off Frostfire Bolts, all of their crit chances absolutely humongous. You've also then got a choice between 3 bombs, so you've got Nether Tempest, Living Bomb and Frost Bomb, and you will be using these on a fight-by-fight basis because Nether Tempest is great for lots and lots of adds, Living Bomb is more of your single target bomb, although it's still great if you're putting it on 2 as well, and then Frost Bomb is really strong when loads of mobs are stacked because the explosion when it finishes is the thing that you're after here. The great thing as well is these bombs are affected by the pandemic effect now. So if you refresh your Living Bomb, for example, when there's around 3 seconds left, you'll still get the explosion, but the dot will carry on ticking. Now this is where the management part of the spec comes, because you need to make sure you've got 100% uptime, or as close to 100% as possible, on your bomb. But then you're also going to be managing, most likely, Invocation. While Runa Power and Incanter's Ward are both solid choices as well, Invocation is pretty much the go-to on most fights as a Frost Mage. It removes the Evocation cooldown completely, reduces its channel period and duration by 50%. So over just a few seconds, you're going to get a huge amount of mana back, but at the same time, once you complete the Evocation, you deal 15% increased damage. Now this buff lasts 1 minute, so you want this up all the time. As it's about to run off, you want to already be channeling Evocation to get it back on again, and this all revolves around the management part of what makes this spec fun. Keeping the Invocation buff up on yourself, keeping the bomb up on the target, and then reacting to tons and tons of procs while using Frostbolt as a filler. But not only this, you've also got your pet that's doing incredible damage as well, and being able to use an AoE freeze that your pet's got, and ultimately, the better you are at managing the pet, the better of a Frost Mage you'll be. Now there's also tons of glyphs that make Frost Mage even more fun, with things like Glyph of Splitting Ice, where your Ice Lance and Icicles now hit 1 additional target for 50% damage, so you're just naturally cleaving at all times. Glyph of Water Elemental that just turns your pet into an absolute tank because it increases the health of it by 40%, but also allows it to cast while moving, so on heavy movement fights, having this pretty much all the time is obviously worthwhile. And then some survival talents that every spec of Mage gets access to, which you'll absolutely love, with things like Greater Invisibility, which is on a short 1.5 minute cooldown and gives you a 90% damage reduction for 3 seconds after using it. Now of course you can actually use invisibility as invisibility like it's meant for, but really you use this as a defensive. And of course Cauterize, which normally is for fire mages, but every spec of mage gets this, so you can be a Frost Mage with Cauterize now, which feels absolutely phenomenal. Ice Flows has got to be mentioned as well, just because it's absolutely insane to be able to cast the one and only filler that you've got being Frostbolt whilst moving. Now this has got 3 charges on a 20-second recharge, so you can use this pretty much whenever you need it. Overall, the Frost Mage in my opinion is one of the most fun specs to play, and I would say it's the most fun range spec to play, and it's easy. You will get great results on a Frost Mage without even trying too hard. As long as you're keeping your bomb up and keeping your Invocation on yourself, consuming the procs that you've got, you will have a great time. I don't want to go into the other two specs of mage all that much, to be honest with you, because without massive changes, they're probably not something you're going to play a great deal in Phase 1, but if you are a die-hard fire mage and you want to play fire mage, it's honestly not changed all that much. All specs, including Frost, get a brand new ability called Alter Time, which is actually really fun to use. You alter the fabric of time, basically going back 6 seconds. So if you stack up on loads of buffs, let's say you've got things like Fingers of Frost procs and Brain Freeze procs, and then you use Alter Time, you can then consume those procs, go back 6 seconds to when you've got them, and use them again. But honestly, in terms of Fire Mage, it pretty much is more of the same. You're fishing for really big combusts, you're wanting to get instant Pyroblast procs by getting 2 crits in a row. You've now got Inferno Blast, which replaces Fire Blast, so you're no longer having to hope that you get an impact proc to be able to spread your dots. You've got an ability that spreads them all the time. And then you're getting some access to really good talents, which ordinarily would be associated with another spec. And then don't get me wrong, Arcane is great as well, and I would say in Phase 1, Arcane is probably the only rival in spec currently. Again, there could be many more changes we get from Blizzard, which would make the order of some of these slightly different in terms of their output, but I want to focus purely on fun. And Arcane, in my opinion, not as fun as Fire or Frost, but it is an optional spec, and if you enjoy that style of play, you might enjoy Arcane as well. Now, please remember, this is incredibly subjective, and these are what I consider to be the top 3 fun specs. That's not to say Enhancement Shaman, Elemental Shaman, Survival Hunter, Arms Warrior, and every other spec in the game is not fun, because they are. In Mr. Pandaria, the fortunate thing is all of them are incredibly fun. These just fit the playstyle that I really enjoy and that you might really enjoy as well. And as I say, the added bonus is that 2 of these 3 specs, or 2 of these 3 classes, are actually incredibly easy to play while also being incredibly fun. So if you enjoyed the video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. Consider joining the channel as a member. Check out Rested XP if you want the fastest way to level. That's in the pinned comment and the description below. And also, the giveaway was active at the start of this video, which you probably noticed. Details on that are in the description below. But basically, go back and find a movie quote and put it in the comments. But yeah, cool, I'm off. I'll see you on the next one.